Well, thank you very much for that glowing introduction. I don't really deserve it. I want to make a few points before I start. The first point is that this session, the session straight after the afternoon break, is not very popular with conference presenters. Right? It's called the graveyard shift. Where people after a long day take an opportunity to catch up on their sleep. And if they're not allowed to catch up on their sleep, they become tetchy and irritable. So let's not have any of that, right? Nobody falling asleep. Okay. The second point I want to make is that this isn't really, like the other papers I've seen this morning, this isn't really a research paper. This is a presentation, right? A personal presentation, reflecting really my thoughts, observations, and advice. And it's really aimed at the practicing tutor. You know, the people at the chalk face who maybe want to get involved in research but don't quite know how, feeling under pressure to get involved with research. I just want to show them that it's not that difficult. I want to try to remove a little bit of the mystique associated with the research and actually show that it's actually interesting and fun. And the third point I want to make is, looking around the room, I have a nasty feeling that I'm the oldest person here, which is rather worrying. Okay, so it's a bit different to the other. I've seen some papers this morning. I thought they were all very, very good, very well presented and well thought through studies. And what I liked about was the adventurousness of spirit that was evident. Okay, there might be problems in research study, but somebody's got to do it. And I was pleased with that sort of adventurousness, the enthusiasm which a lot of people have shown, which is part of the reason that I want to do this. I want to maybe instill a little bit of enthusiasm in the practicing tutors who are here to show them that there are ways forward in doing some sort of educational research. Right, well let's make a start, shall we? Right, these are the objectives of the presentation. I'm going to introduce myself. I've already had an introduction, but I'll add a little bit more. To familiarise delegates with a range of ways to link educational research with professional practice. We're going to look at some actual examples. I'm very pragmatic. Right. I like to do things. And so what I'm going to show you is what a lot of other people have done. People like yourselves, you know, ordinary tutors, practicing tutors, you're part of a massive worldwide community. You're all faced with the same problems. You're trying to teach introductory programming. Well, I mean, that is it's all over the place. Everybody who's trying to teach programming is having the same problems. There's a massive worldwide community. Within Botswana, there'll be lots of people trying to teach introductory programming. Throughout Africa, throughout the world. And what has happened is that people are starting to record their experiences and show people, write about what they do. And there's a wealth of literature out there. It's not got a very long tradition, higher education research. It's not like educational research, which has been around for a long, long time. Higher education research is quite recent, where they actually started looking at how to teach students at higher education level. It really only started off to any great extent in the 1980s and the 1990s, when, I mean, before that, in 1980, you wouldn't be able to find a textbook on how to teach students in higher education. Now, there's lots of them, and some of them are very good. And they're often very practical and pragmatic. And what I personally like is the adaptation of theory into practice. So a theory is taken, somebody says, oh, I like that as a bit of theory, maybe I can apply that in the classroom and come up with some concrete learning experiences, something you can do with your students. I also want to emphasize the multidisciplinary aspects of education research. It's not just computing. I'm going to show you some things from other subject areas which cross over. You know, something in geography, something in economics, something in business, something in the performing arts. The ideas and the concepts are often transferable. You know, something that works in one discipline often will work in another. Not always, but often. And then I'm going to use myself as a case study, because I started off very much like you as a teacher in higher education, and I've sort of developed in a particular way, and my particular way has been down this route. Okay? Yeah? Right, well this is me, Dr Mark Lejik. I got my PhD quite late. I was 47. It's time for you yet. I was quite old, and it developed over a long period of time. I worked 20 years in computing at the University of Sunderland, and I was a reader in informatics education. Before that, I worked as a computer. I worked in industry as a programmer, systems analyst. I've worked in schools, I've worked in colleges, and for the past 20 years I've worked at the University of Sunderland. So I've experienced everything from secondary school right through to PhD level in my experience. I haven't taught primary school. I don't think I want to. It looks very hard work. I'm particularly interested in learning, teaching and assessment, which is something that developed really over my time in Sunderland. Right? It developed. It wasn't at the start of my teaching career. I've always been interested in my subject, which was systems analysis and design, but I developed an interest in learning, teaching and assessment. I've published 2 textbooks on systems analysis. They're a bit dated now. I mean, you tend to, the last one was published in 2002, which in computing terms is very old. And so that's on a computing subject, systems analysis. But I've then, at the same time and later, I've started to develop interest in teaching and learning, and I've published quite a few papers on learning and teaching. Now, I retired from the University of Sunderland in 2007, but I'm a little bit bored. So I've developed associations with people that I knew from my time at Sunderland, the main one of which is Bothorpe College. And since 2008, I've developed a very close association with them, and I come over quite frequently to do mainly staff development. And one of the things I'm particularly pleased with is the postgraduate certificate in higher education, which we run here. We've already had, is it 30 graduates? Something like that. 30 people have already been through it. Many of them are in this room. Many of them, and we've got a current batch of one in Francistown and one in Gaborone, and there's probably over 20 students in the 2 combined cohorts. And what's particularly pleasing is that out of the presentations in this conference, at least 9 of them are being presented by either graduate students or current students. So that's particularly gratifying. And it's one of the drivers actually to me doing this presentation, because I've been so, not surprised, but I'll say the word, pleasantly surprised by the performance of the students, that it's invigorated me actually to actually come along and do this presentation. And this time last year, I was in Cape Town with a couple of people from the college, Mr. Rajesh and Ms. Sabita, and we were presenting a paper, and they were students on the course at the time. So it was very encouraging to see that happen. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's look at this whole idea of research. You hear the term research-led teaching. It can be a bit daunting. It can be a bit worrying when you're at the chalk face and say, is my teaching research-led? Is it? I don't know. And the reason stems in part from the interpretation of it. Because if you look at what research-led teaching normally means, it means this. And this is taken from the website of the University of Durham University, one of the best universities in the UK. Very difficult to get into. You need straight A's. It's a top university. Durham prides itself, this is a quote from the Vice Chancellor, Durham prides itself on its strong tradition of research-led teaching. So our students can be very confident they're getting tuition directly from world-class leaders in their field. So what does that mean? You're studying geography, you're being taught by a world-class researcher in geography, right? And, you know, when you actually look around the place, how many institutions have got world-class researchers in these particular subject areas? I would venture to say not that many. You know, both College might eventually have a world-class researcher in web design and engineering, but I doubt if you've got one at the moment, right? So it puts a whole sort of barrier up, really, doesn't it? And so, how can you get involved when you've got this sort of competition? How can you, as a tutor, be saying, I'm actively engaging with research and it's feeding through to my students? It's not an easy question to answer. So what I'm going to do is provide one way in which you can do it, one way which the people at both colleges have been doing, which is sort of the opposite side of the coin. So this is what I was saying. What about those of us who are not involved with research into our subject area? You're a computing tutor or a business tutor or an accounting tutor, and you may not be actively involved in research in those subjects, right? Which is probably most people. Most people are involved with teaching their students. And so the research aspect, in a lot of colleges, it's a bit of a luxury. You know, it's rather difficult to do, especially if you're involved in researching in an area that involves a lot of equipment, resources, chemistry, that sort of thing. It's very, very difficult to do. So how can we engage with research-led teaching? How can we, as ordinary, cold face, if you like, tutors, do it? How can we do it? Right. Well, we can do it by looking at the latest research in our subject area. We can do that. We can look at it. And we can try and bring that into our teaching, which is probably what we do. You know, we look at the latest research, as long as it fits in with the curriculum. So you can try and glean information from these world-class experts and bring it into your teaching. You can do that. And you can do something else. You can actually start looking at the other side of you. It's not only being a subject area, but being a teacher. And you can start looking at that. So you can embed educational research into our everyday practice, which is what a lot of the people in this conference have been doing. That's what they've been doing. And it's one of those things that sort of dawns on you after a while. You can actually do it, you know, by using your own experience and your own students, your own everyday, day-to-day activities. And it's staring you in the face. And a lot of people don't seem to realise that there is a big research arena out there. It comes as a surprise to them when they see the same problems being tackled by people throughout the world, and they're writing about it in journals and being published on it, and it sort of dawns on them, and I can do this. It reminds me a little bit of the story of the smuggler. Have you ever heard the story of the smuggler? Well, anyway, some time ago, there was this man who lived on a border between two countries, and he was known as the smuggler. But he was never caught smuggling anything. But he was known as the smuggler. And every week, he used to pile on the back of his donkey. He used to pile all sorts of goods and wares. And he used to take them across the border to a market in the other country to sell them. And the border guards were really suspicious about him. Yeah, he's smuggling something. We know he's smuggling something. And they searched him every week. And they never found anything. Never found anything. And nobody ever you know, found any contraband or anything. They thought there was gold, silver, diamonds, you know, maybe weapons on the back of this donkey. But no, they never found anything. All they found was perfectly acceptable things like food and clothes and things which you were likely to sell at a market. Anyway, this guy, he did this for such a long period of time. And then he stopped doing it, he retired. And somebody went to see him and said, you know, you've got to tell me your story. Why did they call you the smuggler? Are you a smuggler? And if so, what is it that you were smuggling? And he said, yes, I was a smuggler. And I got away with it for the whole of my life. And you know what it is I was smuggling? Donkeys. He was smuggling donkeys across the boat, you know. And it was just like in front of it, you know, it's in front of everybody. It's the obvious thing. It's an analogy. It's like when you go to these famous places like, you know, Cape Town and Barcelona, and you ask the people there who live there, you know, what's Table Mountain like, or what's that fantastic cathedral in Barcelona, Sagrada Familia, what's it like inside? And they say, well, I've heard it's very good, but I've never been there. You know, they live in the city. You know, it's familiarity breeds contempt, you know, and so, you know, if you're over familiar, and it's a bit like that with this aspect. You know, it's just there waiting for you to do something. Okay? So that's one of the messages I'm going to try and get across, and I'm hoping that you might sort of like some of the things that you're going to see. So this also applies to active subject researchers. They can do it too. Okay? Right. So there's a number of ways and a number of levels in which you can get involved with educational research. And it all starts off by, you know, I was calling this levels, but it's not really a level. It's things you can do. And the first thing is of course, you research yourself. You know, and this is very similar to the whole concept of the reflective practitioner. And if you start studying for these professional qualifications, like in arts, you want to be a doctor, you usually have to keep some sort of reflective professional log, portfolio of practice. And it's all about knowing yourself and knowing where your areas for development are, knowing what you're good at, being able to reflect on what you've done. You know, this is one of the famous poets, Alexander Pope, said, "Know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man." So, you know, it was before the days of equal rights, it should be man and woman, but basically that was his message, you know, that you need to know yourself in order to know about others. And how do you do that? Well, there's a whole lot of literature on reflection, but there are some practical ways of doing it. Self-evaluation as a means of development. I'll show you a little example. You have to escape out of my presentation. Somewhere down here, should have a self-evaluation questionnaire. Just bear with me a minute. Here we are, self-evaluation questionnaire number 2. Right, it's a scanned copy, I'm afraid. But I'll just show you the sorts of things. We do this on the postgraduate certificate course. It's just a very, very simple thing. It's at the end of a lesson. You know, it's tempting to think, oh, I've come out of the lesson, I've done my job, let's just forget about it and move on to the next thing. It's very easy to do, but it's also a good idea to just take time and figure out how it went. So how can you do it? Well, as well as student feedback and evaluations, you can look at yourself. You can try and look at your own view of your own performance. So, for example, this is a very practical thing. How well did I, all of these things, there's 22 things in this example, how well did I link this session to other sessions? How well did I introduce it? Did I make the aims clear to the students? And you can sort of grade yourself on each of these different aspects. And so all well and good, so you grade yourself, but what do you do with it? How do you use that to move forward? Well, you could take one or two of them. and say, okay, I didn't introduce this session at all. You know, I didn't do it. So it was not applicable, I didn't do it. And you should really, you should introduce a session. Or some of them are more complex than others. Maybe I didn't use particularly good aids as illustrations, and so on. And you can pick a couple of them that you think, you know, I'll just concentrate on those two. And then, for the next few weeks, you can try and rectify those particular things. So you can go into every session you do and make sure you introduce it. And you can start looking at ways in which you can make your illustrations more attractive and understandable to students. And after a while, these become embedded. So you'll introduce the session and it'll become automatic. So you're using self-evaluation to aid in your own improvement of delivery as a tutor. And then you can maybe look at the more difficult things, coping with individual difficulties, which is a difficult thing to do. You know, it's not easy to cope with individual difficulties. And so on and so forth. Right? You can use something like that as a way of evaluating yourself. You can look at student evaluations. You can try and see how they agree with you. And an interesting thing would be to actually do this lesson self-evaluation, do it yourself, and then get the students to do the same thing. What do you think would happen? It could be the same, it could be different. I would think it would be different. You know? And that's an interesting thing in its own right. You know, actually looking at that. So that's something which you can do at sort of the grassroots level. The next one is researching others. So you've all got peers, you've all got other tutors. This conference is an ideal example of looking at what other people are doing, actually extending the net. I think this conference is great, and I hope it continues every year. You know, it's a very useful way of being made aware of what other people are doing, and it can be quite inspirational when you see some of the things that are going on. But you can research into what others are doing, others within your own institution, by doing things like peer observation, which we do in both our college. I know we do peer observation in both our college. And often peer observation is as useful to the person who's doing the observing as the person who's being observed. You know, it's a two-way thing. So you can look at others. And then let's get on to the more technical things. And we can look at publications. Like I said before, there's a whole resource out there in the world of very practical papers solving very common practical problems. And what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is actually show you something. Okay? I'm actually going to nip out of this and look at them. I mean, I'm going to pick on a number of websites. I'm not going to access the web because it is a little bit slow, so I've downloaded some of the articles. I mean, this particular one, it's a UK one. It's the Higher Education Academy, which is a sort of an umbrella organisation. It's like a professional body for higher education tutors. And they have subject centres, so you tend to gravitate towards your own subject centres. And they publish lots, and it's all free, and it's all high quality. It's really very good. And I'm going to show you some of the journals that have been published. In fact, we're going to look at them. There are lots of others as well. There's one in America called Faculty Focus. The only problem with that is sometimes you have to pay for the article, which is not that nice. And then, of course, you've got your own, if you've got access to a research database like we have at both our college, EBSCO Host is fantastic because you've got access to just about every journal to do with education that there is. But what I'm going to do is have a look at some of these, and let's just see. I want to get across the usefulness of these things and how straightforward they are. So I'm going to nip out of this again. and first of all, show you the HE Academy website. This is the website, and let's just have a look at the journals that they publish. Some of them have come to an end. There was a very good one for business called the International Journal of Management Education, but we've still got access to them. But look at all of these subjects. Subject areas: biological sciences, maths, statistics. Can you all see that? Philosophy, sociology, computing. I'm going to concentrate on computing, but I'm also going to look at some of the others. For example, we've got one called Planet, for geography, earth and environmental sciences. We've got one for economics somewhere. I think it's down here. There's definitely one for economics. There it is, the International Review of Economics Education. But what I want to do is show you some of them. So I'm going to nip out here. I'm going to get into here and have a look at some sample papers. Right, there's a whole list here which I've downloaded and just put on the hard drive. Let's just have a look at, these are all from the Higher Education Academy website. And let's just see, we'll take one from economics, okay? Now this is about, do supplemental online recorded lectures help students learn microeconomics? Okay. I'm not going to go through the paper, but the answer is yes. Especially before exams. Right, that's the conclusion. Okay. And you think to yourself, is that relevant to me in computing? Could you do something like that in computing? And you probably think, yeah, it's worth a punt, it's worth a go. I could possibly do something like that. So that is, what I'm trying to say is, that is not research into economics. It's a way into the teaching of economics. It's a research into the teaching of economics. So the whole point is that this sort of research is what you might call multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary, so that you can take ideas from one particular subject area and apply it to your own. So that's one of them. Let's have a look at another. Geography. Let's look at geography, see what's going on with geography. Right, now this is a fairly complicated, here's one. This is about using structured reflection to encourage more active use of feedback. So it's about how students can actually make better use of feedback. That could be applied to computing, but it's a geography paper. Let's just page down and have a look at some others. But the other thing is these papers are often very well written. And if you are thinking of writing a paper, here's another one. This is all from geography, using portfolio assessment to engage level 1 geoscience students in their subject and develop their learning skills. So the concept here is portfolios and assessing a portfolio. I understand that's what you do in Melbourne College in the Communication Study Skills module. So it can be applied. So you can get ideas from one subject and cross to another. Let's have a look for some more. Here's one. More high level, assessment criteria and standards of the geography dissertation in the UK. So say you're struggling with designing assessment criteria for doing a dissertation in business or computing. Here's something from the field of geography, which is bound to be relevant. And so on and so forth. So it goes on and on. Marks, readback, marks and feedback. Do we really need examinations? Very controversial paper, obviously. Do we really need examinations? So there's a whole lot of activity going on there. Let's look for management. Management business. A 3-stage framework for teaching literature reviews. And this is from people who are doing it in management business studies. How to do a literature review. Now that's not just applicable to management and business studies. It can be applied to anything else. So it's quite easy to make the point. And then let's have a look at some more general articles still. Let's have a look at this one. This is about how to manage students learning in teams. These are all published refereed papers, but they're very practical and pragmatic. Let's have a look at another one. Right, now this is an interesting paper. It's done by David Kember, Amber Ho and Selena Hong from Hong Kong, and they write a lot about these sorts of things. And there's a theme coming through from this conference about motivation. It's a lot of stuff on motivation. And here's something, and these are just practicing tutors. What they've done is they want to motivate students, which everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to motivate students. So they're trying to establish the factors that go into motivating students. And in this paper, I think they came up with, from their sample, 8 factors. One of them was establishing relevance. Try to make your material and your lectures relevant to the students. And so, I mean, they've come up with others. Let's have a look at the results. Hang on, I might have passed it. Sorry about this, I've gone past it. They've come up with 8 oh dear. This is not very good. Right. Well, somewhere in here, okay, they've come up with 8 motivating factors. Okay, one of which is relevance. A couple of others are student-teacher interaction and interaction with fellow students. So what these people are doing, they're taking each of those factors and researching them in depth. So this is a massive study. They've taken, you know, a number of factors which are supposed, or they've found, help in the motivation of students, and are starting to research each of them in depth. So this is about establishing relevance, so trying to make what you're teaching relevant. They've done a proper educational study on it. Okay? Now let's just have a look at maybe some of the computing ones. For example, here's one. An online student response system. Now, this was actually referred to by one of the presenters this morning. This is using an online student response system in small group teaching for pilot study. So what they've done, these particular people in Beaufort College, have taken this paper and they've started saying, this is where they got the idea from, I know it. This is where they got the idea from. So they've then started to apply it to their own students. They've taken the idea and started to apply it to their own students. And all of these things are very, very practical. That's the beauty of some of these papers. They're very, very practical. Okay? Yeah, sorry, what was that? Never. You're joking. Okay. Here's another one. We talked about, somebody was talking about Facebook this morning. This is from the University of Sunderland. Web and software, this would appeal to the software engineers in the room, of which there's probably quite a few. Web and software engineering the Facebook way, an undergraduate mini project. In other words, using Facebook as a way of developing, doing web programming. They've actually done it, they've actually used it. I know because I know the people involved. So they've actually been, let's look at the abstract. The 7-week mini project. Run twice at the university, designed to teach applied web programming using the Facebook platform. Actually, I'll have to reduce it. And makes the use of Facebook as a suitable platform to teach web programming. Very interesting. An interesting thing to do. And so, all of these have been written by just ordinary practicing tutors, not professors or anything like that. These have been written by practicing tutors, just like yourselves. So what I'm saying is, it's not It's not easy, but it's not a difficult thing to do. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. Okay. Have I made a point there?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Oh, hang on. Because that's what I want to do, I want to make points. Action 4. Try things out. It doesn't have to be, you know, a massive study. You can just try things out. You've looked at others, you've looked at your peers, you've maybe looked at some papers. Try it out. At first, it doesn't have to be particularly formal. You can just try it out to get the taste of it. To taste it. Then you can try it out with a bit more rigour, and then maybe try it in a more formal setting. Okay? Next thing you can do is what's happening here. You can disseminate. You can do it within institutions. Like this, although this is a bit broader because it's between institutions as well. And it's such a good idea, this conference. I think it should be applauded. It's a very, very clever way of bringing the whole research community together. So you can do it within institutions through workshops and presentations. And it can be hard going, you know, standing up and delivering a paper, which many of you have done. It may have been the first thing you did. Sometimes it's not that easy, especially if you're doing it for the first time. It can be a bit stressful. But, you know, who else is going to do it? Somebody should do it. And I've been very impressed by what's been going on. Between institutions, and then you can go up to conferences, which this is, but you can try bigger conferences, try to get accepted in bigger conferences. Then you can go on to the next stage up, which is about getting published in a journal. And then, the difficult one is to go through and commit yourself to higher study. Perhaps a master's, or even a PhD. So it is a possibility, it is a possibility. But don't go into a PhD with your eyes closed. So those of you who've got one will know what I'm talking about. It's hard work. Anyway, what I'm going to do is just finish off with my story, because I've gone through this cycle pretty much myself. Just to show that, you know, that it does, you know, things can happen like this. At the University of Sunderland, I was a lecturer in systems analysis and design. So it's a subject, that was my subject. I was a course leader, I was an industrial training tutor, so I looked after placements. I was the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee. I was a teaching fellow, and then I ended up being a reader in informatics education. So all of those, not necessarily in that order, was my experience over the 20 years at Sunderland. But I became more and more interested in the actual, what I was doing in the classroom sort of thing. Right? That's what happened to me. I became very interested in group work. You know, how do you assess groups fairly? You know, group work is a good idea, but the perennial problem, how do you assess them fairly? You know, difficult one. Work-based learning, became very interested in that. Negotiated learning and assessment in general. I just became interested in it. You know, I just developed a personal interest. Others of my colleagues weren't, you know, but I was. I enjoyed it. And then at the university, we were under pressure to do research. You know, I've never really done any research. You know, I was working as working in industry. I mean, you do research. You're looking at other organisations, and you know, you're doing a sort of research. You're not doing academic research. So I became interested. We were all feeling under pressure to do something. You know, if you wanted to get on in universities in the UK, you've got to be research active. You know, it's just a fact of life. You know, and so we all felt, all of us who were sort of chalk-faced teachers would feel, oh, we've got to do some research. What are we going to do? You know, this sort of thing. So yeah, was I interested? Yes, I was. What was I interested in? Was it computing? Well, I am interested in computing. Yes. Do I want to do, you know, research into computing? Well, maybe. What am I going to research into? I've got no idea. You know, it was this sort of real internal struggle that you had. And then I decided, what am I really interested in? Which was the other side. So I ended up looking at teaching and learning in particular groups, group work and assessment. And I did what a lot of you people are going through now, internal workshops, national workshops, conferences, then writing magazine articles, then writing journal papers, and then I decided, actually, I think I could do a PhD out of this. You know, I could take this further. I could do one. You know, basically, because I was starting to, as I was going through all this, I started to formulate, you know, ideas and theories and so on. So I thought, I think I could, you know, go for it. So I did. I went for it, and it was really interesting. And the advantage that I had was I was using my own students as the vehicle. So the lessons I learned from this was, first of all, research is interesting and fun if you're doing something that appeals to you. It can be a real chore if you're doing something that you're not. You have to actually have a lot of focus. PhDs in particular are notorious for their dropout rate. Completion rate in PhDs is very, very poor. The time it takes to get published, like I said, myself and Rajesh and Subita, we were in Cape Town this time last year, and we did a paper on group assessment. It was the South African Association of Institutional Researchers, and apparently it's only going to be published now, which is a year later. So it takes a long, long time to get published in a journal. It takes, you know, at least, well, not at least, but it takes a year is fairly common. Because it's got to go, be submitted, be reviewed, rewritten, usually, in the light of the review, and so on. Other things I learned was the inconsistency of experts. You can get two people reading your paper. One thinks it's great, the other thinks it's awful. Happens a lot. I personally found that qualitative research was new to me. Being open-minded, and then another theme that's coming out of this particular conference is there's nothing wrong with making mistakes, as long as they're not massive. Okay, so in summary, what I'm saying is it's a side of a coin. That's what I'm saying. It's a side of a coin. Any tutor in higher education can engage in educational research at various levels. Okay?